The dust came again that morning, just like it had every morning for the past 3 years. Sarah Henderson stood at the window of their small farmhouse, watching the brown cloud roll across what used to be their wheat fields. She was 16 years old, and she could barely remember a time when the sky was blue and clear. Her father, William Henderson, sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. He had not spoken much in the past few weeks. Sarah knew why. There was almost no food left in the house. The chickens had stopped laying eggs. The cow had died last month, and the fields outside were nothing but dry, cracked earth. Sarah's mother, Ruth, moved slowly around the kitchen. She was trying to make breakfast from the little bit of flour they had left. Her hands shook as she worked. Ruth had been sick for weeks now, but she never complained. She just kept working, kept trying to hold the family together. "Mama, you should rest," Sarah said softly. "Let me do that," Ruth shook her head. "I'm fine, dear. You go check if there are any eggs. Maybe the hens surprised us today." Sarah knew there would be no eggs, but she went outside anyway. The wind hit her face immediately, carrying dust that stung her eyes. She pulled her scarf up over her nose and mouth and walked toward the chicken coop. The land around their farm looked dead. Nothing grew anymore. The trees that used to line the road were bare and gray. Some of them had fallen over, their roots too dry to hold them up. Sarah remembered when she was little, how green everything had been. Her father used to grow the best wheat in the county. People would come from other towns to buy Henderson grain. Now people were leaving. Every week another family would pack up whatever they could fit in their truck and drive away. They were going to California, they said, or Oregon, anywhere but here, anywhere there might be rain and jobs and food. Sarah reached the chicken coop and looked inside. The 3 hens they had left were huddled in the corner, looking as miserable as everything else. There were no eggs. Sarah had known there would not be any, but her heart still sank. She walked back to the house slowly. Through the window she could see her parents talking. Her father was standing now, his face red. Her mother was crying. Sarah stopped outside the door, not wanting to interrupt, but she could hear their voices through the thin walls. "We can't stay here, William," her mother was saying. "We're going to starve. And go where?" Her father shouted. "We have no money for gas. We have no money for anything. Everyone is leaving, but we're stuck here. Then we need to ask for help. Go to the church. Go to the neighbors. The neighbors are as poor as we are. The church has nothing left to give. I've asked everyone, Ruth. Everyone." Sarah heard her mother sob. She waited a moment, then pushed open the door and came inside. Her parents stopped talking immediately and tried to smile at her. "No eggs," Sarah said quietly. Her father nodded. He looked old, Sarah thought. Just a few years ago he had been strong and happy. Now his face was thin and covered with worry lines. His clothes hung loose on his body. They ate a small breakfast of thin porridge. Nobody talked much. When they finished, William put on his hat and said he was going to town. Maybe someone needed work done, he said. Maybe the general store had news of jobs. After he left, Sarah helped her mother clean the dishes. There were only 3 plates, 3 cups, 3 spoons. They had sold everything else months ago. "Mama," Sarah said, "are we going to be okay?" Ruth stopped washing and looked at her daughter. She reached out and touched Sarah's cheek. "Of course, sweetheart. Your father will find a way. He always does." But Sarah could see the fear in her mother's eyes. She knew they were not going to be okay, not unless something changed. That afternoon, Sarah walked to the nearby creek. It was almost completely dry now, just a thin trickle of brown water at the bottom. She sat on a rock and tried not to cry. She was scared, not just for herself but for her parents. Her mother was getting sicker every day. Her father was disappearing into himself, becoming a ghost of the man he used to be. Sarah thought about school. She had loved school. She had been good at her lessons, especially reading and writing. Her teacher, Miss Brennan, had told her she could become a teacher herself one day if she kept studying. But Sarah had not been to school in over a year. There was no time for school when you were trying to survive. She heard a sound and looked up. A truck was coming down the road, moving slowly through the dust. It was Mr. Garrett from the general store. He stopped when he saw Sarah and leaned out the window. "Your father in town, Sarah?" he called. "Yes, sir. He went this morning." Mr. Garrett nodded. "Tell him I need to talk to him. It's important. About his account at the store." Sarah's stomach tightened. The account. Her father owed Mr. Garrett money for supplies they had bought on credit. "A lot of money, yes, sir," she said. "I'll tell him." The truck drove away, leaving a cloud of dust behind it. Sarah walked home slowly, dreading having to give her father the message. When William came home that evening, he looked even worse than when he had left. He had found no work. No one had any jobs. No one had any money. Sarah told him about Mr. Garrett, and her father's face went pale. "He wants to talk to me about the account," William said quietly. "I know what that means. He's going to demand payment." "What will we do?" Ruth asked. "I don't know." William sat down heavily at the table. "I just don't know." That night, Sarah lay in her small bed and listened to her parents talking in the next room. She could not hear the words, but she could hear the desperation in their voices. She pulled her thin blanket up to her chin and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the wind howled. Dust scratched against the windows like tiny claws. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed for rain. She prayed for help. She prayed for anything that might save them. But the morning came with no rain. Just more dust. Just more hunger. Just more fear. William left early to go to town again. This time, he did not say he was looking for work. He just said he had business to take care of. Sarah watched him walk down the road, his shoulders bent, his steps slow. A few hours later, a stranger came to the house. He was a tall man with cold eyes, driving a fancy truck that looked out of place in their poor town. He asked for William Henderson. "He's not here," Ruth said, standing in the doorway. "I'll wait," the man said. He looked at Sarah, who was standing behind her mother. His gaze made her uncomfortable. "That your daughter?" "Yes," Ruth said carefully. "Why?" "Just asking." The man smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "I'll be doing business with your husband soon. I like to know who I'm dealing with." He drove away, and Ruth closed the door quickly. Her hands were shaking. "Who was that?" Sarah asked. "I don't know," Ruth said. "But I didn't like him." That evening, William came home with a bag of potatoes. Real potatoes. More food than they had seen in weeks. Ruth stared at the bag in shock. "William, where did you get these?" "A man in town," William said. He would not look at his wife. "A grain merchant. His name is Dalton." "The man who came here today?" Ruth asked. William nodded. "He gave me these as a down payment. On a business arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Ruth's voice was sharp with worry. "We'll talk about it later." William set the bag on the table. "Let's just eat tonight, please." Sarah looked at her father. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But she was too hungry to ask questions. They cooked the potatoes and ate them slowly, savoring every bite. That night, Sarah heard her parents arguing again. Her mother's voice was raised, angry and scared. Her father's voice was defensive, desperate. Sarah pressed her pillow over her ears, not wanting to hear. But one sentence cut through clearly. Her mother's voice, thick with tears. "You can't be serious, William. She's our daughter. Our little girl." Sarah's blood went cold. They were talking about her. Something was happening, something involving her, and it was bad enough to make her mother cry and her father defensive. She lay awake all night, fear crawling through her stomach like ice. William Henderson stood outside the general store, his hat in his hands. He had been standing there for 10 minutes, trying to gather the courage to go inside. The sun beat down on him and dust swirled around his feet. He knew what he had to do. He just did not know if he could live with himself after doing it. Finally, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The store was dim and cool. Shelves that used to be full of goods now stood mostly empty. Mr. Garrett looked up from behind the counter. "William," he said. His voice was not friendly. "We need to talk about your account." "I know," William said quietly. "I know I owe you money. It's been 6 months, William. I've been patient. But I have bills to pay too. I need something, anything." William nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. It was his father's pocket watch, the only valuable thing he had left. He set it on the counter. Mr. Garrett picked it up and examined it. He sighed. "This will cover maybe a quarter of what you owe. What about the rest?" "I'm working on it," William said. "There's a man, a grain merchant named Dalton. He's going to help me." Mr. Garrett's face changed. "Dalton? William, you need to be careful with that man. I've heard things." "What kind of things?" "He makes deals that aren't quite what they seem. People who do business with him often regret it." "I don't have a choice," William said, his voice breaking. "My wife is dying." We have no food. What else can I do? Mr. Garrett looked at him with pity. He took the pocket watch and put it in his drawer. I'll mark your account. But William, please, be very careful. William left the store and walked to the small restaurant at the edge of town. It was really just a house where Mrs. Chen served food to whoever could pay. Dalton was waiting at a table in the back. The grain merchant was a large man with slicked back hair and a suit that seemed too nice for this poor town. He smiled when he saw William showing gold teeth. Mr. Henderson, he said. Please sit down. William sat. His stomach was tight with nerves. I've been thinking about your situation, Dalton said, and I believe I can help you. I can give you enough grain and supplies to last your family 6 months. Maybe more. What do you want in return? William asked. I have nothing to give you. That's not quite true. Dalton leaned forward. You have a daughter. Sarah, isn't that her name? William felt his blood go cold. What about her? I have a large ranch in Texas. I need workers. Housekeepers, cooks, people to help manage the place. I can offer your daughter a job. She would be well fed, have a place to sleep, and I would pay her a small wage. How much? William asked carefully. $2 a week, plus room and board. It did not sound bad, William thought. Sarah could work, send money home, and be safe and fed. But something in Dalton's smile made him uneasy. For how long? William asked. The contract would be for 5 years. 5 years? She's only 16. She'd be 21 before she came home. It's a fair contract, Dalton said smoothly. And in return, I'll give you enough supplies to keep your family alive. Your wife can get medical care. You can rebuild. Think about it, Mr. Henderson. What other choice do you have? William closed his eyes. He thought of Ruth, growing thinner and weaker every day. He thought of the empty cupboards, the dead fields, the bills they could not pay. Can I see this contract? He asked. Dalton pulled papers from his jacket and spread them on the table. William tried to read them, but the words were long and complicated. He had only finished 6th grade and legal language confused him. It's all standard, Dalton assured him. Your daughter works for me for 5 years. I provide food, shelter, and wages. You receive supplies now. Everyone benefits. Why can she come home to visit? After the first year, she can have 1 week home per year. William's hands shook as he held the papers. This was wrong. He knew it was wrong. But what else could he do? Let his family starve? Watch Ruth die because they could not afford a doctor? I need to think about it, he said. Of course. Dalton pulled the papers back. But don't think too long. I'm leaving town in 3 days. This offer expires then. William walked home in a daze. When he got there, Ruth was lying down. Sarah was sitting beside her, reading aloud from an old book. They both looked up when he came in. Papa, Sarah said, smiling. Look, I found our old copy of Little Women, Mama's favorite. William looked at his daughter. She had his wife's dark hair and kind eyes. She was so young, so innocent. How could he even consider what Dalton was proposing? That night, after Sarah went to bed, William told Ruth everything. She listened in silence until he finished. Then she slapped him. You can't be serious, William, she said, her voice thick with tears. She's our daughter. Our little girl. I know, William said, his own tears falling. But Ruth, look at us. Look at you. You need a doctor. You need medicine. We need food, and I can't provide any of it. We'll find another way. What other way? I've tried everything. Everyone in town is as poor as we are. We can't leave because we have no money. We can't stay because we're starving. At least this way Sarah would be safe and fed. You don't know that. Ruth grabbed his arm. You don't know anything about this man or what he really wants. You heard what Mr. Garrett said. People regret doing business with him. What if we're already out of options? Ruth started coughing, a deep rattling cough that shook her whole body. William held her until it stopped. When she pulled her hand away from her mouth, there was blood on it. They both stared at the blood in silence. I'm going to die, William, Ruth said softly. I can feel it. But I won't die knowing we sold our daughter to save ourselves. We're not selling her. It's a job. A contract. Read me the contract. Every word. William retrieved the papers from his jacket. Under the lamplight, they read through the document together. The more they read, the more Ruth's face hardened. This isn't a job contract, she said. Look at this clause. She can't leave the property without permission. She can't break the contract for any reason. If she tries to leave, you have to pay back 3 times what you received in supplies plus damages. William, this is slavery. This is selling our daughter. Don't say that, William pleaded. I would never sell Sarah. I'm trying to save all of us. By destroying her life? By sending her away to a man we don't know for 5 years? What happens to her there? Who protects her? William had no answer. He sat with his head in his hands, sobbing. The next morning, Sarah woke to find her father already gone. Her mother was up despite her illness, cooking the last of the potatoes. "Mama, where's Papa?" Sarah asked. "He went to town." Ruth's voice was tight. "Sarah, come sit down. We need to talk." Sarah sat at the table, fear creeping into her chest. "What's wrong?" Ruth took her daughter's hands. "Your father has been offered a deal. A man named Dalton wants to give us supplies in exchange for you working for him." "Working for him? Doing what?" "Housework, cooking on his ranch in Texas." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "For 5 years." Sarah felt the room spin. 5 years? "But I can't leave you and Papa. Who will take care of you?" "That's what your father is thinking. That we'll have supplies to survive and you'll be fed and safe." "Do you think I should go?" Sarah asked quietly. "No." Ruth's voice was firm. "I think it's wrong. I think this man Dalton is not what he seems. But Sarah, your father is desperate. He's not thinking clearly. He loves us so much that he's willing to do something terrible because he thinks it will save us." Sarah looked at her mother's thin face, at the dark circles under her eyes. She thought about her father, once so strong and proud, now broken by years of failure and hunger. "If it would save you," Sarah said slowly. "If it would keep you and Papa alive, maybe I should do it." "No." Ruth squeezed her hands hard. "Listen to me, Sarah. You are 16 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. Your father and I, we've lived. We've had good years, but you haven't had your chance yet. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for us, but Mama, no. We'll find another way. We'll leave. We'll walk to the next state if we have to. But we won't do this." Sarah wanted to believe her mother, but she had seen the blood on Ruth's hand the night before, even though her mother did not know she had seen it. She knew her mother was dying, and she knew her father was out of options. That afternoon, a knock came at the door. Sarah opened it to find Dalton standing there, his gold teeth gleaming in the sun. "Good afternoon," he said. "You must be Sarah. Is your father home?" "No, sir," Sarah said, uneasy under his gaze. "And your mother?" "She's resting." "I see." Dalton looked past her into the house, his eyes taking in their poverty. "You have a nice family, Sarah. Your father is a good man. He's trying very hard to take care of you all." "Yes, sir," Sarah said, not knowing what else to say. "I hope we'll be able to help each other soon." Dalton tipped his hat and walked back to his truck. Sarah closed the door quickly and leaned against it, her heart pounding. She did not like that man. She did not like him at all. The third day came too quickly. William had barely slept since meeting with Dalton. He had spent 2 days trying to find any other solution. He had asked the bank for a loan and been refused. He had gone to the church, but the church had nothing left to give. He had knocked on every door in town asking for work, for help, for anything. There was nothing. The drought had broken everyone. That morning, William told Sarah to put on her best dress. They were going to town, he said. To the general store. Ruth was too weak to come, but she held Sarah tight before they left. "Remember what I said," Ruth whispered in her daughter's ear. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do." Sarah nodded, though her stomach was sick with fear. She knew what was going to happen today. Her father was going to sign that contract. She was going to be sent away with Dalton. The walk to town felt like a death march. William said nothing. Sarah said nothing. The dust blew around them, and the sun burned overhead. When they reached the general store, Dalton's truck was already there. So were several other people from town. Word had gotten around that something was happening. In small towns, everyone knew everyone's business. Inside the store, Dalton was waiting with his papers spread out on the counter. Mr. Garrett stood nearby, looking unhappy. Miss Brennan, Sarah's old teacher, was there too. She had heard what was happening and had come to try to stop it. "Mr. Henderson," Miss Brennan said as they entered, "please don't do this. There has to be another way." "There isn't," William said quietly. "I've looked everywhere." "Then let me help. I have some savings. Not much, but something." "It's not enough," Dalton interrupted smoothly. "Mr. Henderson owes money all over town. His family needs food, medicine, supplies. What you have wouldn't last a week." Miss Brennan's face flushed with anger, but she had no response. She knew he was right. William walked to the counter. His hands shook as he picked up the pen. Sarah stood behind him, tears running down her face. This was really happening. Her father was really going to do this, Papa, she whispered. Please. William closed his eyes. I'm sorry, Sarah, I'm so sorry. He put the pen to paper and began to sign his name. The scratch of the pen on paper was the only sound in the store. Everyone watched in horrible silence. William had written Will when the door slammed open. A young man strode in, his boots loud on the wooden floor. He was tall and lean, dressed in work clothes covered with dust. His hat was pushed back on his head and his face was red with anger or exertion. Maybe both. What's going on here? He demanded. Sarah looked up and felt a small surge of hope. It was Jim McAllister. She had known Jim since she was little. He worked at the Patterson Ranch about 5 miles from their farm. He had always been kind to her. Once when she was 12, he had pulled her out of the creek when she fell in. Another time he had brought them a side of beef when his boss had extra. This is private business, McAllister, Mr. Garrett said. Jim ignored him. He walked straight to the counter and looked at the papers. His eyes scanned them quickly, and Sarah saw his jaw tighten. Henderson, what are you doing? Jim asked, his voice dangerous and low. What I have to do, William said. He sounded defeated. Stay out of it, Jim. Stay out of it? Jim's voice rose. You're selling your daughter for grain. The words hung in the air like a slap. William flinched. Sarah felt her face burn with shame. The other people in the store gasped. I'm not selling her, William said desperately. It's a job. A contract. Jim snatched up the papers and read them more carefully. His face grew darker with each line. When he finished, he turned to Dalton. This isn't a job contract, Jim said coldly. This is slavery. You're taking this girl for 5 years and her father has no way to get her back if something goes wrong. Everything is legal, Dalton said. His smooth voice had an edge now. The contract has been reviewed by lawyers. Mr. Henderson is signing of his own free will. His own free will? Jim's voice was shaking with rage now. The man is starving. His wife is dying. You're taking advantage of his desperation. I'm offering a solution to his problems. You're offering to take his daughter, Jim roared. The sound made everyone in the store jump. You think I don't know what kind of man you are? I've heard about you, Dalton. You go to poor towns and you take young girls with these contracts, and those girls are never seen again. That's slander, Dalton said, but his voice was no longer smooth. I could sue you for saying such things. Then sue me. Jim stepped closer to Dalton. But you're not taking Sarah, not today. Not ever. Sarah felt hope bloom in her chest, but then her father spoke. Jim, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need this. My family needs this. Your family needs you to keep your daughter safe, Jim said, not taking his eyes off Dalton. Tell me something, Henderson. Did you ask around town about this man? Did you ask anyone if they knew him? William was silent. I did, Jim continued. Yesterday, when I heard what was happening, I rode to 3 different towns asking about Dalton. You want to know what I learned? That's enough, Dalton said sharply. 2 years ago, he made the same deal with a family in Kansas. The daughter was 17. She went to his ranch and her family never heard from her again. When her father went to find her, Dalton said she had run away. No one ever found her. The store went completely silent. Sarah felt ice in her veins. You're lying, Dalton said, but his voice was uncertain now. Am I? Then explain why that family filed a police report. Explain why there's a warrant out for you in Kansas under a different name. Dalton's face went red. This is ridiculous. I have a legitimate business. Then you won't mind if we send a telegram to the sheriff in Kansas and ask about it? Dalton looked around the store. Everyone was staring at him now with suspicion and fear. The trap was closing around him and he knew it. Fine, he said, gathering his papers. I don't need this trouble. Henderson, you're on your own. Wait, William said desperately. I need those supplies. My family should have thought of that before you let this cowboy interfere. Dalton pushed past Jim and headed for the door. Jim blocked his path. Not so fast. You gave Henderson potatoes 3 days ago. As a down payment, you said. Those were a gift, goodwill. Then you won't mind giving him the rest of what you promised. Since you're such a generous man, get out of my way or I'll move you myself. Jim did not budge. You're not leaving until we settle this. Dalton reached into his jacket. For a moment, Sarah thought he might pull out a gun, but instead he pulled out a money clip and threw a few bills at William. There. We're even. Now get out of my way. This time Jim stepped aside. Dalton stormed out of the store. They heard his truck start and drive away fast and angry. The store was silent. William stood at the counter staring at the bills Dalton had thrown. They were not much, maybe enough to buy a week of food. Then he looked at the unsigned contract still on the counter. "What have I done?" he whispered. "You didn't sign it," Miss Brennan said gently. "That's what matters. But now we have nothing. No grain. No supplies, nothing." William turned to Jim, and for the first time Sarah saw real anger in her father's face. "Do you understand what you've done? You've killed us. You've killed my wife." Jim's face went pale, but his voice stayed steady. "No, sir. I've saved your daughter. There's a difference, and saved her for what? To starve with us? There are other ways." "What other ways?" "Tell me, Jim. You're so smart. You stopped this deal. Now what? How do I feed my family? How do I get medicine for my wife? Tell me." Jim was quiet for a moment. Sarah could see him thinking, his jaw working. Then he turned to Mr. Garrett. "How much does Henderson owe you?" he asked. "Jim, this isn't your concern," Mr. Garrett said. "How much?" Mr. Garrett sighed. $43. Plus interest. Jim pulled out a small leather wallet from his back pocket. He counted out bills and coins, laying them on the counter. "That's $27. It's all I have on me right now." "Jim, no," Sarah said. "You can't." "Be quiet, Sarah." Jim turned back to Dalton's abandoned papers. He picked them up and read them again, this time more carefully. "These papers say he was going to give you 6 months of grain and supplies. Is that right, Henderson?" William nodded numbly. "How much would that cost?" Jim asked Mr. Garrett. The store owner calculated in his head. "In today's prices? Probably about $60 worth of goods. Maybe 70. So we need about $90 total, to clear Henderson's debt and give his family what Dalton promised." Jim looked around the store at the gathered people. "Miss Brennan, you said you had some savings. How much can you spare?" "Jim, I offered already. I have about $15. That's $42 so far." Jim turned to the others in the store. "Anyone else?" Old Mr. Chen, who owned the restaurant, stepped forward. "I can give $5. "I can give $3, said Mrs. Morrison, who ran the boarding house. "I don't have cash," said Tom Briggs, a farmer. "But I have some chickens. 3 laying hens. That's worth something." "I have jars of preserved vegetables," said another woman. From before the drought, one by one, people started offering what they could. A few dollars here, some food there. Jim wrote it all down on the back of Dalton's contract, keeping count. Sarah watched in amazement. These people were as poor as her family. They were all struggling. But they were giving what little they had to help. After everyone had contributed, Jim added up the total. Sarah stared at Jim McAllister, unable to speak. Around them, the people in the store were equally silent. What Jim had just offered to do was extraordinary. That saddle had been his father's. Everyone in town knew the story. Jim's father had died 5 years ago, and that saddle was one of the few things Jim had left to remember him by. Mr. Garrett cleared his throat. "Jim, I can't take your father's saddle." "It's not right." "It's mine to give," Jim said firmly, "and I'm giving it. But what will you use?" "A cowboy needs a good saddle." "I'll manage." Jim turned to William. "Do we have a deal, Henderson?" William looked at his daughter, then at Jim, then at the floor. Tears ran down his face. "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve your help." "Maybe not," Jim said, not unkindly, "but Sarah does. Your wife does. That's what matters." Miss Brennan stepped forward. "Jim's right. This isn't about what William deserves. This is about keeping a family together." She looked at the others gathered in the store. "We're a community. When one of us is in trouble, we help. That's how we survive times like these." "She's right," said Mr. Chen. "We help each other." William covered his face with his hands and sobbed. Sarah went to him and put her arms around him. He held her tight, shaking with the force of his crying. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I almost... It's okay, Papa," Sarah whispered, though she was crying too. "It's okay." Jim gave them a moment, then spoke to Mr. Garrett. "Let's settle this up. I need to get back to the ranch, and Henderson needs to get supplies home to his wife." For the next hour, they worked out the details. Jim went outside and removed his saddle from his horse, bringing it into the store. Mr. Garrett examined it carefully. running his hands over the tooled leather. "This is fine work," he said quietly. "Your father was a good man, Jim. He'd be proud of you today." "I hope so," Jim said. The cash and goods were counted. Mr. Garrett marked William's account as paid in full. Then they loaded up supplies for the Henderson family. Flour, beans, rice, canned goods, salt, sugar. Tom Briggs went home and returned with 3 fat hens in a cage. Mrs. Morrison brought preserved vegetables from her cellar. Sarah watched it all in a daze. Just an hour ago, she had been moments away from being taken by Dalton. Now people were filling bags with food for her family. It felt like a dream. When everything was ready, Jim helped load the supplies into Mr. Garrett's old truck. The store owner had offered to drive the Hendersons home since they had walked to town. "I'll ride alongside," Jim said. He swung up onto his horse, settling onto the bare back. Without a saddle, he looked awkward and uncomfortable, but he did not complain. The drive back to the Henderson farm was quiet. William sat in the truck bed with the supplies, still too overwhelmed to speak. Sarah sat up front with Mr. Garrett, watching Jim ride beside them. "That young man is something special," Mr. Garrett said. "Not many people would do what he did today." "No," Sarah agreed softly. "Not many." When they reached the farm, Ruth came to the door. She looked at the supplies being unloaded, at her husband's tear-stained face, at Jim sitting on his horse. Her expression changed from confusion to understanding to relief. "It didn't happen," she said. "You didn't sign." "No," William said. "Thanks to Jim and half the town." Ruth looked at Jim. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for saving my daughter." Jim tipped his hat. "Yes, ma'am." They carried the supplies inside. Ruth insisted everyone stay for coffee, though they had to make it with the chicory she had been using to stretch their supplies. They sat around the small kitchen table, and William told Ruth everything that had happened. When he finished, Ruth reached across the table and took Jim's hand. "I don't know how we can ever repay you," she said. "You don't need to repay me," Jim said. He looked uncomfortable with all the attention and gratitude. "That saddle was your father's. It meant something to you." Jim was quiet for a moment. "It did," he admitted. "But it's just a thing. Sarah is a person. A good person with her whole life ahead of her. My pa would have done the same thing I did. I know he would have. So in a way, I feel like I honored his memory today." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. She wanted to say something, to tell Jim how grateful she was, but the words would not come. Mr. Garrett finished his coffee and stood. "I need to get back to town. Jim, you want a ride?" "No, thank you. I'll ride." Jim stood as well, his chair scraping on the floor. "Jim," Sarah said suddenly. Everyone looked at her. "Can I talk to you outside for a minute?" "Of course," Jim said. They walked out to where his horse was tied. The sun was starting to sink toward the horizon, painting the dusty sky orange and red. Sarah twisted her hands together, nervous. "I wanted to thank you," she started. "I know everyone already said thank you, but I need to say it too. You saved my life today, maybe literally. You don't need to thank me, Sarah." "Yes, I do." "What you did? Giving up your father's saddle? Organizing everyone to help. That's the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me." Jim looked down at his boots. "I just did what was right." "No, you did more than that." Sarah took a breath. "Jim, why did you help us? I know you said it was the right thing to do, but it's more than that, isn't it?" Jim was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up and met her eyes. "I've known you since you were a little girl, Sarah. I've watched you grow up. And somewhere along the way, I started caring about you. A lot, maybe more than I should." Sarah's heart beat faster. "What do you mean?" "I mean that when I heard what your father was planning, it felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. The thought of you being taken away, of being in danger, of never seeing you again." Jim shook his head. "I couldn't let it happen. I would have given up everything I owned to keep you safe." "Jim," Sarah whispered. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel obligated to me," Jim said quickly. "You're 16 years old. You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to understand why I did what I did." Sarah felt tears on her cheeks again. "I'm not as young as you think. And you're not as old as you make yourself sound. You're what, 28? 27, Jim admitted. "That's not so old." Sarah smiled through her tears. "Jim, I've noticed you too. For years now. When you would ride by our farm, I would hope you would stop. When you helped me out of the creek that time, I thought about it for months. I've always liked you. I just never thought you would like me back. Jim's face softened. How could I not like you? You're smart and kind and brave. Your teacher told me once that you were the best student she ever had. She said you could be anything you wanted to be. I wanted to be a teacher, Sarah said softly. Before all this, before the drought and the hunger, I wanted to go to normal school and come back and teach in our town. You still can, Jim said. You're going to survive this, Sarah. Your family is going to survive. And when things get better, you can go to school. You can become a teacher. You can do anything. What about you? What do you want? Jim looked out at the dying fields around them. I want this drought to end. I want people to stop suffering. I want to be able to help more folks like your family. He paused. And I want you to be happy. That's all I really want. Sarah stepped closer to him. I'm happy right now. Because of you. They stood there in the fading light, not touching but close enough to feel each other's presence. Jim's horse shifted behind them, breaking the moment. I should go, Jim said. It'll be dark soon and riding bareback isn't easy. When will I see you again? Sarah asked. I'll come by in a few days. Check on your family. Make sure you have everything you need. Jim? Sarah reached out and touched his arm. Thank you. For everything. For saving me. For believing I was worth saving. You were always worth saving, Sarah, always. Jim untied his horse and swung up onto its back. He looked down at Sarah and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. Then he touched his hat brim and rode away. Sarah stood there until he disappeared into the dust and distance. When she went back inside, she found her mother watching her through the window. That's a good man, Ruth said. I know, Sarah replied. He cares about you very much. I know that too. Ruth smiled, the first real smile Sarah had seen on her mother's face in months. Good, hold on to that. In times like these, good people are what save us. That night, the Henderson family ate a real meal for the first time in weeks. Beans and cornbread and canned peaches. It was not fancy, but it was food. They said grace before eating, and William's voice broke when he thanked God for Jim McAllister and the kindness of their neighbors. After dinner, Sarah helped her mother clean up. Ruth was moving easier already, just from having food in her stomach and hope in her heart. Sarah, Ruth said as they washed dishes, your father is ashamed of what he almost did. He's going to carry that guilt for a long time. You need to forgive him. I already have, Mama. Tell him that. He needs to hear it. Sarah found her father sitting outside, staring at the stars. She sat down beside him. Papa, she said, I forgive you. William turned to her, surprise on his face. I almost destroyed your life. But you didn't. And I understand why you considered it. You were trying to save Mama. You were trying to save all of us. That doesn't make it right. No. But it makes it human. We all make mistakes when we're desperate and scared. 3 days passed before Jim returned to the Henderson farm. Sarah had been watching the road every day, hoping to see him riding up on his horse. When he finally came, she was in the garden trying to coax a few vegetables to grow in the stubborn soil. Hello, Sarah, Jim called as he approached. Sarah looked up and smiled. Her heart did a little jump in her chest at the sight of him. Jim, I was hoping you'd come. Jim dismounted and walked over to the garden. He looked at the small shoots of green pushing up through the dirt. Looks like you might get something to grow here. Maybe. Mama saved seeds from before the drought. We're trying everything we can think of. How is your mother? Better. She's eating now and she has more energy. The doctor came yesterday. Jim, we were able to pay him because of what you did. He gave Mama medicine for her cough. Jim smiled. That's good news. They walked toward the house together. Ruth came to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked healthier already, with more color in her face. Jim, come in, she said. I just made bread. Real bread with real flour. I can smell it from here, ma'am. Smells wonderful. Inside, William was sitting at the table working on papers. He looked up when Jim entered and immediately stood. Jim, he said, I want to talk to you about a plan I have. What kind of plan? Jim asked. William spread the papers on the table. I've been talking to some of the other farmers. We're thinking about pooling our resources, sharing equipment, seeds, knowledge. If we work together, we might be able to make something grow. And I've been offered a job in town. It's not much, just maintenance work at the school, but it's steady money. That sounds like a good plan, Jim said. It's because of you that I can even make plans. Before I was just trying to survive day to day. Now I can think about the future. William extended his hand. I owe you more than I can ever repay. Jim shook his hand. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Henderson. Just take care of your family. That's enough. Ruth cut thick slices of warm bread and put them on the table with butter and jam. The four of them sat together, eating and talking. It felt normal, Sarah thought. Like life could be normal again. After they ate, Jim asked Sarah if she wanted to walk with him. They walked toward the creek, which still had only a thin trickle of water, but was at least not completely dry. Sarah, Jim said as they walked. I need to tell you something. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. What is it? I've been offered a promotion at the ranch. Mr. Patterson wants to make me foreman. It means more money and more responsibility. Jim, that's wonderful, Sarah said, genuinely happy for him. It is, but it also means I'll be working longer hours. I won't be able to visit as often as I'd like. Sarah felt a pang of disappointment, but she tried not to show it. I understand. You have to work. I want you to know that just because I can't visit often doesn't mean I'm not thinking about you. Because I am. All the time, Sarah felt her cheeks warm. I think about you too. They reached the creek and sat on the bank. Jim picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. Sarah, you're still young, he said. You have time to figure out what you want in life. I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything or like you have to wait for me. What if I want to? Sarah asked. Jim looked at her. What? What if I want to wait for you? What if I want to see where this goes between us? You should go to school. Become a teacher like you wanted. Live your life. I can do both, Sarah said. I can go to school and still care about you. They're not opposite things, Jim smiled. You're wise beyond your years, you know that? I've had to grow up fast. We all have. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the thin stream of water flow past. Finally, Jim spoke again. When things get better, when you finish school, maybe we could talk about a future together. A real future. Sarah's heart soared. I'd like that. Until then, I'll work hard and save money. And you work hard at your studies, deal? Deal, Sarah said, holding out her hand. Jim shook it, then held it for a moment longer than necessary. They smiled at each other, both thinking about possibilities and promises. The months that followed were hard but hopeful. William worked at the school, earning enough money to keep food on the table. He and the other farmers planted crops together, sharing what little resources they had. Some of the crops failed, but some grew. It was not much, but it was progress. Ruth's health slowly improved with regular food and medicine. She started teaching Sarah at home, making sure her daughter did not fall too far behind in her studies. Miss Brennan brought books and assignments, helping Sarah prepare for when she could return to school. Jim visited when he could, usually on Sunday afternoons. He would bring small gifts, a ribbon for Sarah's hair, a book he thought she would enjoy. Once he brought a whole chicken for the family Sunday dinner. Each visit was precious, and Sarah found herself counting the days between them. One Sunday, 6 months after the incident with Dalton, Jim arrived with big news. Mr. Patterson had given him a raise and a small house on the ranch property. It was not much, just 2 rooms, but it was his own place. I'm saving money faster now, Jim told Sarah as they walked. Things are looking up. I'm happy for you, Sarah said. And she meant it, even though she felt a little sad that Jim was building a life that did not include her yet. As if reading her thoughts, Jim stopped walking and turned to face her. Sarah, I want you in that life. When you're ready. When the time is right, I want you to know that everything I'm doing with our future in mind. Our future, Sarah repeated, liking how the words sounded. If you'll have me, Jim said. I know I'm not rich. I'm just a cowboy. But I'm honest and I work hard and I love you. I've loved you for a long time, even when I thought I shouldn't. Sarah felt tears in her eyes, but they were happy tears. I love you too, Jim. I have for years. Jim pulled her into a hug and Sarah rested her head against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady. This was what safety felt like, she thought. This was what love felt like. The drought finally broke the following spring. Rain came, soft at first, then harder. People ran out of their houses laughing and crying, letting the water soak their faces. The land drank it in desperately, and within weeks, green shoots began appearing everywhere. Sarah stood in the rain with her mother and father, all of them soaked through but not caring. This was the beginning of something new, something better. That summer, Sarah turned 18. Miss Brennan helped her apply to normal school in the next county. To everyone's delight, Sarah was accepted with a small scholarship to cover tuition. She would start in the fall. The night before Sarah was to leave for school, Jim came to visit. They walked to their usual spot by the creek, which now flowed freely with clear water. "I'm proud of you," Jim said. "You're going to be a wonderful teacher." "I'm scared," Sarah admitted. "I've never been away from home before. You're the bravest person I know." "You'll be fine. Will you write to me?" Sarah asked. "Every week," Jim promised. "And I'll visit when I can." "It's 2 years until I finish," Sarah said. "That's a long time." "I've waited this long," Jim said. "I can wait 2 more years." "You're worth waiting for, Sarah Henderson." They stood close together in the moonlight. Jim reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a simple silver ring. "This was my mother's," he said. "It's not an engagement ring. Not yet, but I want you to have it, to remember that I'm waiting for you, that I'll always be here." Sarah took the ring with shaking hands. She slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "When I come back," she said. "When I finish school. Will you ask me properly?" Jim smiled. "Yes, ma'am. I'll get down on one knee and everything. Then I'll say yes. I'm saying yes right now, in fact. In 2 years, the answer will still be yes." Jim laughed and spun her around. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. 2 years felt like forever, but they passed. Sarah excelled at normal school, finishing at the top of her class. She came home with her teaching certificate and a job offer at the school in town, the same school where her father worked, where she had once been a student. Jim was waiting at the train station when she arrived. He looked older somehow, more mature. His face was tanned from working in the sun, and he stood tall and confident. When he saw Sarah, his face lit up with the biggest smile she had ever seen. "Welcome home, teacher," he said. Sarah dropped her bag and ran to him. He caught her and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around just like he had 2 years before. "I missed you," Sarah said when he set her down. "I missed you too, every single day." "Jim McAllister," Sarah said, trying to sound serious but unable to stop smiling. "Do you have something to ask me?" Jim laughed. Right there on the train platform with a dozen people watching, he got down on one knee. He pulled out a ring, a different ring this time with a small diamond that caught the sunlight. "Sarah Henderson," he said. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Yes, yes, yes." He stood and slipped the ring onto her finger right next to his mother's silver band. Then he kissed her, and the people on the platform clapped and cheered. They were married that fall in a small ceremony at the church. The whole town came. Mr. Garrett gave Sarah away since her father was too emotional to walk her down the aisle without crying. Miss Brennan read from the Bible. Ruth Henderson wore her best dress and smiled through happy tears.